Recently, I've been really into the idea of using embroidery to add handmade details to things I already own. So today I'm going to show you how to add some pretty constellations to a plain tote bag. Read the video description below for a list of supplies I used and where you can find them. And if you're like me and you have a bag lying around that could use an extra something to make it more interesting, give this video a thumbs up. I started off by searching for star charts for constellations on Google Images. You could draw one yourself or trace one that you find online. What constellation do you want to use? Your zodiac sign or something else? Tell me your favorite in the comments down below. Make sure the paper is the right size to fit on your bag or whatever you'll be embellishing. Then once your design is ready, we can get started. Take the star chart template you made and poke a hole through each of the points where you'd like to put a star. I just used my embroidery needle for this and then used a pen to make the holes a little bigger. Then tape the template onto the bag you're planning to embroider so it stays in place. To mark the points on your bag, push a pen through each of those holes. I started out using a disappearing ink fabric marker, but it didn't show up very well on the bag I chose. I ended up using this black fabric marker with the knowledge that the stitches will cover the marks later. You can really embroider these designs however you want, but these are the star shapes I'll be embroidering. The larger stars are these 6 pointed asterisks. Smaller stars between the constellations are just little X's, and I'm going to use dashed lines of running stitch to connect each constellation. I like to think of embroidery as a way of doodling with thread, so if you're new to this, keep that idea and these drawings in mind. Also, keep the diagram aside so you can see where to stitch the lines between the dots. As you can see here, I did the first constellation to practice before I filmed to figure out the best way to do this, but now I'll show you how to do the other one. Take a piece of embroidery floss. I am folding mine in half so my lines will be twice as thick, and I usually aim for a little less than an arm length so it doesn't get too messy. Thread your doubled strand of floss onto an embroidery needle with a nice big eye. One end will have the 2 loose ends and the other end will be a loop where you folded it. So to start, reach your needle into the bag and push it up through the first dot at the end of one of the constellations. If your bag's fabric is super thick like mine, you might need to use some pliers or a thimble to pull it through. Use your other hand to hold on to the looped end of the thread inside the bag so you don't pull it through by accident. Then make a tiny stitch by putting your needle back down, still on that dot, just a thread or 2 away from where it's coming out. Inside the bag, put your needle through the loop at the end of your thread and that'll secure it. When you pull that, you'll be left with this little blip on top that will be covered by the center of the star we stitch next. So for our first star, push your needle up from the back where you want one of your star points to end and pull the thread through. Make it closer or farther from the dot to make your star bigger or smaller. Then trace a line with your needle from that point, connecting it with the center dot, and keep going straight, stopping the same distance away from the center, so that dot would be dividing the line you traced in half. Poke just a little bit of your needle into that spot, then turn it so you can push it back up where you want the next diagonal line to start. Remember that drawing I showed you and picture this spot as the 3rd point you'll be making. Then pull your needle the rest of the way through. That'll give you 2 star points finished and the thread sticking out of the 3rd point. To find the 4th point, pull your thread across the center and over to the other side of the star. Now we'll do the same thing. Push your needle in just a little on the 4th point, turn it, and push it out where you want the 5th point to go. It should be right between your 4th point and your 2nd point from before. Pull that through and you should have a squishy little X shape. To finish the star, find the last point by tracing a line back across the center of the star. And this time I'm pushing my needle in just a little bit and poking it back out on the line between this star and the next one in the constellation. So when you tug on the string, not only do you have your first finished star, but your thread is also ready to embroider the first dashed line. For my lines, I'm going to make little dashes using running stitch. So to start that, trace the line with your needle, push it down through the fabric where you want your first dash to stop, and before you pull it through, push it back up on that same line where you want the space after the dash to end. I decided to keep my gaps between the dashes as tiny as possible. This particular line is really short, so I only have room for 1 more dash. Add more by repeating that step if you have a longer line. To end the line and start on the next star, push the needle down just a little, rotate your needle to find the spot where you want the first point of the next star to start, and push it up right in that spot. And now your first dashed line is done and we're all set to start working on the next big star. Follow the same steps as we did before, tracing the line across the center dot, pushing the needle down and back up where the third point starts, making that squishy X shape, and when you go to push your needle down through the sixth and final point, push it back up on the line that connects the center of that star with the next dot in your constellation. This constellation is slowly starting to take shape. Repeat those steps as you go all the way around, using the chart as a reference to see where to stitch the lines that connect the constellations. Feel free to practice these basic shapes on some scrap fabric if you're new to this before you start on a bag. And don't worry, if you don't like the way it looks, you can always cut the threads, pull them out, and start over. I actually did this after I tried this the first time, and it looks much better now that I've had a bit of practice. Anytime you run out of thread, push your current thread through to the back and make one of those little blips on a dot you haven't stitched over yet to secure the thread. You can also tie a knot on the inside of the bag if you want to make sure it stays. Then start a new piece of thread the same way we started in the very beginning. Once you're ready to finish the constellation, I'll show you how to add these little extra stars that aren't part of a constellation. So here I have one dash left on this line, and over here I have a dot I'd like to reach. To do that, start pushing your needle down where you want that dash to end. Now, using the hand that's inside the bag, push up and grab the fabric between where your needle is and where you want it to go. That way you don't need a super long needle in order to push it through and reach that spot, like in the book A Wrinkle in Time. And you can do that whenever you need to reach another star on your bag if you don't want to tie it off and start a new piece of thread. These little stars are really simple, done the same way as the bigger stars, but it's just one little X shape, two lines crossed over the dot you made. To finish off my embroidery, I pushed the needle down through the last point on the X, but then I pushed it up again under the center point of the X. Then I made one last little blip hidden under the X, pushed the needle up through the fabric in a random spot, and trimmed off the excess. This was my first project using this tying off method. In my other projects, I usually just tie knots, but I thought this would be a good time to test a new way to avoid them. And there is my finished Constellation embroidery tote bag. There are loads of ways to customize this, so feel free to choose any constellations you want, make up new ones, vary the thread color, change the shape of the stars and lines, and you could even embroider this on something other than a bag, like a jacket or a banner to hang on your wall. Now that I know how easy it is to do this, I'm already coming up with ideas for how to embroider little details on other things I own. If you embroider any constellations onto something, I'd love to see it. Share your photos on social media and tag me at LaurenFairWX. And if you're new here, click the subscribe button below the video to stay in touch. I hope you enjoyed making this as much as I did. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.